the United States. Filled with young talent, incredible psychological tricks, and bang! A third time! What do you do in that situation when your opponent is literally raging and my own friends warning me not to play? This was the first time I set foot in the USA to play chess in 8 years. My fate placed me at the 105th rank out of 114 participants as a straight up underdog. Here are my incredible 9 rounds of this magnificently strong tournament. Before I share with you my best chess tournament of the year so far, if you're struggling with your openings and specifically memory retention of which moves to play during your openings, I highly recommend Chess Reps, the sponsor of this video. Chess Reps is a science-backed chess memorization tool for your openings. You can choose any of 20, 30, 40 openings to choose from, and from there, you can just go about the moves. You can learn, practice, drill, and even try out your new opening against the interactive software. It is great for ingraining new openings and trying them out over the board. Use my link in the description to try out Chess Reps today. First round, I'm playing up. Very up. 2250 Xi Peng, who's I think a Chinese-American chess player who's 16 years old and 2250 FIDE. I was expecting the worst, but I saw through his games that he's going for a certain trend. So he used to play d4 a lot, but it seems like he's going for this trend, knight f3, which is the ready opening. So I went with d5, g3, knight f6, and after bishop g2, I activated the flexible octopus. 95 overall, tentacles weave, theory snaps. Combat your opponent's mainline opening with a flexible sideline to steer away from the bulk of the opponent's knowledge. And I did, steering away from the bulk with bishop g4. That is trendy these days, but still, I would say, less popular than your normal e6 here. My opponent goes d4, and now I go knight bd7, and now my bishop is happy, whereas usually I would just sink my bishop on c8, play e6, knight bd7, my bishop wouldn't be happy. So, okay, the bishop's quite happy. Castles, pawn to e6, and then I'll develop my bishop and castles here, or maybe develop here, right? So c4. Now I play c6, and after my opponent plays very quickly knight c3, I say to myself, wait, I play the Catalan triangle usually with black, albeit with the bishop back on c8 here. But usually you can take this if white is not careful, and sure enough, this is the best move. D takes c4, taking that free-seeming pawn. Now, white has something that we call compensation in the process of they'll be trying to regain this pawn with a lot of initiative, with a lot of energy. So a4, stopping my b5, defending this pawn, and now I go for bishop b4 here. A bit inaccurate. A little bit of a better move was a5, which you have to know, kind of, and we're both out of book at this point. So bishop b4, and my opponent goes knight d2 pretty quickly, which is the best move. He's putting pressure on this pawn, and now I have difficulty defending the pawn because I can't play b5 anymore, and my resources are exhausted. Or so my opponent would think. Because here I had knight b6, defending the pawn with the knight, and after a5, I have knight d5. Very important. Pressuring this knight, and if my opponent decides to commit to taken, I can take with this e-pawn, defending this pawn at once. So my opponent only has one move here to equalize, and it's a really nice idea. If you take here, I have takes, and then knight takes, and I'll win this pawn because my bishop on g4, sitting like a duck, is now playing very nicely and combining to win a pawn. So my opponent had to use prophylaxis and see that this bishop was a weapon and play h3 here, whereas when bishop h4, g4, and bishop back, now you can take and have no worries about this pawn on e2. And actually, this is just winning for white, like knight d6, and you can sack the exchange here, which is spectacular. But my opponent plays knight a2 instead, to which I was like, okay, I'm already up a pawn. If I take this pawn with my bishop, I'm up 2 pawns. And now after knight takes and bishop back, I'm up a full pawn clear. And my opponent played knight a2 way back when, very fast. So I was like, wow, okay. I'm up a full pawn. He's giving me a pawn. Now, you can feel it from the black piece's perspective. We don't have the equivalent feeling of a pawn up in this position because white seems to have so much ground, and it will become clear if it isn't already in the next few moves. Queen d3, getting out of the pin and preparing e4 to take some space. And I castle, best move, b3. He wants to develop his bishop here or here, which would be even more menacing. So I go rook e8 just to prevent this bishop here. And now e4, kicking my knight. Knight e7 was much better, so you know the margin is becoming thin as well. And now my opponent goes f3. Kicking my bishop once more, I go back, and now rook fd1, or rook d1 simply. And here, I have an insane resource. Insane. To keep the advantage, keep my pawn up through a tactical device. And I'll challenge you to find it if you wish. Pause the video to solve for black here. It retains a pawn up. But the idea is so foreign, I don't expect anyone to find it, actually. Because it didn't even cross my mind during the game. The idea is pawn to e5. So, black can just take here. But then I have a knight takes. And if queen takes, I make use of the discoordinated rooks on the bottom rank to take this rook. And if pawn takes, I just take here, and it's equal, and I'm fine. So the real reason why e5 is not really looking good is that knight takes e5 can happen. Because here, after takes, queen takes, and rook takes, I didn't like this bishop b2 here. It looked kind of funny and ugly. But Stockfish's whole idea is to play e5, sack this pawn, and now knight e4 works. What? Sacrificing the knight two ways. If the pawn takes, now we have bishop takes, queen takes, and now we pick up this knight because the queen is undefended and this is a pin. And if queen takes, there's bishop takes because this rook is undefended because the rooks aren't connected. And here we're up 2 pawns and fully up 2 pawns winning. So this e5 completely went through my head. I mean, e5 and then sack your knight to bait a knight on this e5 square that would be knocked out easily is crazy. Instead, I played a mistake. Knight takes c4. And I get it. It doesn't look good because this pawn that's bad becomes great. But my idea was to play e5, which is still small edge for the black pieces. And after d5, best is b5 here, actually, which is insane. But I had takes, and bishop d6. So that I create for myself 2 outside pass pawns. And I blockade my opponent's protected pass pawn on d5. Very interesting. Small edge for the black pieces, but we continue. Bishop e3. And now I want to ask you the question. What would you do in this position? You have 2 pass pawns, and you have 2 different plans. Either you can try to untangle or, let's say, bring your forces together here with your minor pieces and your queen. So like queen e7, knight d7 first, and then you scale up your pawns, maybe like throw in a rook b8 first, or you play a6, b5, and then use that space from the pass pawns to create queen e7, rook b8, knight d7, and then you push forward. So the best plan is knight d7. And let's say white pressures, which to me that was the obvious. Now you have knight c5. So already you're defending this. And if bishop takes, you can take back with checked, which is a key. So queen c2 pressuring. And then it becomes really concrete, a6. And if bishop takes, you have some rook c8 things. But I played a6 here. I felt the need to take space before white pressures my pawns and keeps them low. To me, the higher my pawns are up the board, the stronger they get, especially that they're helping each other because they're connected pass pawns. So my opponent goes rook b1. And now, I mean, I don't understand it, but the best move here is to literally give 2 pieces for the rook. Knight takes c4. If queen takes, you have bishop b6. Bishop g6, pardon. So takes, and this is like small edge, like good small edge for black because we have 2 pawns and the rook for the 2 minor pieces. But I played b5, which is not knight takes e5. And now after rook c1, I have problems with the c6 square, which was the major concession of b5. But I come up with a great idea. This infiltration looks terrible for me. I mean, white will double rooks, white will play in my zone. But then I got the idea, why don't we just let it happen? Because to me, if I try to intercept, I'll be trading here and then knight b4 and then pressure and then the knight will come to c6 and I don't want any of this. So I said to myself, what if we just let the rooks in? So I play queen e7, letting the rook to c6. And sure enough, my opponent played it and it's not a good move. Because as this rook infiltrates, there are less rooks on the bottom rank to stop my connected pass pawns. And we'll see this later in the game as being an issue for the white pieces. So I go knight d7. My opponent goes queen d2. And now I realize I might get into some trouble if like queen a5 lands and rook takes a6. So I panic. The best move is just knight c5, which is quite not obvious. On queen a5, just f6. And black is sitting well. I guess we can just connect with rook b8. But I played knight b8. Took a long turn, played a bad move type thing. Knight b8 attacking the rook, forcing it to commit to a square. And after rook c2, I play queen b7. So there's a resource, which is the reason for all my mistakes in the next moves, that I don't find for a long time. Okay, I won't mention what it is until I play it, of course. So I play queen b7, which is passive, and it lets my opponent enter in with this knight b4. But first, my opponent goes queen a5, very good move, in my opinion. I have the resource, which I miss, and I play knight d7. And after rook c6, now I'm in a bit of trouble. If I go back to f8, there's rook c7 winning a piece. So I'm forced. It's really not a good sign when you're forced. I'm forced to go bishop back to b8. And now my opponent misses a move that stops my resource and plays instead king h1, which is a bit slow. And now I am up against a brick wall and I have to get myself out of there. And I have one move, which is the resource, that is the only move that's not completely losing and stays in the game. That move, ladies and gentlemen, is pawn to f5. About time is what I annotated under f5. Here, you want to weaken the d5 square, and you're breaking this pawn structure, putting some pressure on this weak e4 point. And this is very important because this is our only source of counterplay for the black pieces. So my opponent is already running quite low on time, takes more time, like too much time, and plays bishop g1, which is a slow move. And suddenly I'm like, okay, I think I'm back in this. Because now I take, and play knight f6. And suddenly I have a target for the first time since I won the pawn on a5, like on move 10. My plan is very simple. I'm going to go bishop g6 and just pressure this. So knight b4, bishop g6. And now my opponent has to defend. Passivity. I don't know which is the word, passiveness. So I go rook c8. My idea here is to play bishop c7, kicking the queen, and then go a5. And suddenly my pawns are rolling down the board. So my opponent has to stop this and goes rook c1. And now I go rook f8. Here I had a really blessed move that's like an advantage. It's bishop d6. Threatening to take here, queen takes, and then like a5 stuff if I can. And there's no rook takes, obviously, because rook takes c1. But I missed it. We're both running low on time. We're in like the 10 to 12 minute range now. I go rook f8. A move that doesn't do much, but just gets out of the c8 square and pressures this e4 pawn twice as much. So my opponent goes back, has to defend, and I go back to c8, tempting kind of a three move repetition draw, and now queen b6. He breaks the 3-move repetition draw proposal by me. And now I'm forced to find an only move, because this is very scary. If I take this queen, my opponent has rook takes c8 check. And once I move or block, bishop takes back the queen, and white is winning with a rook up. So I have to find queen d7. The only move, still defending my rook and moving my queen. And so now white wins back my pawns. Knight takes a6. Bishop a7, attacking the queen. Queen takes. And now I take. King takes, best move. And now rook takes. And now we pose a question to the white pieces. What would you rather give? Because my opponent had seen this before taking on a6 with his knight and took like half his time, like something big. And now he's running down on time. He has like 3 to 5 minutes on his clock. But he has to decide here. Pawn takes or queen takes? If pawn takes, you allow queen d4 check, king here, and then knight takes e4. And here I'm threatening like a smothered mate with knight f2 check, knight h3 double check, and then queen g1 sacking my queen, and then knight back to f2 with mate. And so this is not pleasant at all for white. He has to find like bishop f3 or h3 and complications. Very complicated because white also has some queen b7 stuff. But my opponent plays queen takes c6 in an act of desperation, sacking a piece for a strong passed pawn here. And I have two choices, basically. Either I win the piece and I give this strong passed pawn to my opponent, he'll go rook c1 and probably win back my piece, or I play queen a7 check, which forks the knight and king, and after queen a7, knight c5, I try to win this knight, which you can see from the eval bar is winning for black. But at the time, I looked at this and couldn't find anything. There's no knight d7, there's no knight takes c4, there's no rook c8 ideas. You have to find the only move to win here for black, and that is bishop e8. And I missed this move. I missed bishop e8 and played queen takes c6, going into this endgame up a piece, but after white plays rook c1, it is very hard and, may I say, impossible to stop this pawn without sacking back the piece. Now, if I had a knight on c7, I would be winning, but that's not the case. So I took a lot of time here. I think I had like 9 minutes. So I took like 3-4 minutes to come up with a good solution, I would say. So I play knight takes c4. And if c7, I can just go back knight d6 and always sacrifice my knight. So I find a way here to win a pawn in a rook endgame. So I take a pawn and then sack my piece back for the pawn on c8. And after rook takes king f7. And now I enter an endgame with one pawn up, a rook endgame, albeit it's completely equal, against a 2250. So it's a 2-result game, either a draw or a win for me. I'm very pleased, of course. My opponent plays this flawlessly. Already, it looks tough. Like if I get rook a2 in, cutting the king, it's really tough for white, and might I say probably winning. And if king g2 things, I get rook a2 check, forcing the king to stick to this pawn on h2, and might I say this looks pretty winning as well. So my opponent plays rook c2 in a very scary position. He plays the very, very nice move rook c2, barring my rook from this second rank and keeping this king even-keeled on the second rank as well. So I said to myself, if I can't cut the king on this second rank like this, I'm going to cut the king like this so that my pawn can march without the king's presence in front of it. So rook c7 check, king up, and now rook e7. And this is where things get annoying because I can't go this way, which is what I would want to do because I give a pawn, right? So after rook e7, once again, I can't go here because my pawn would be given. So rook f5. So I have forced moves up a pawn in a rook endgame, which is not the best. So king g2, and now I play h5 to prevent some g4 stuff in the future, h3, and now I go king f6 to kick the rook off of here. The rook goes down and I go king g5. And after rook e6, I go g6. And here, my opponent, very impressively, with low time, finds a very nice resource, g4. Sacrificing a pawn, and if I take this, he'll just win back the pawn in a completely dissolved and equal rook endgame. So sure enough, we enter this. And if you know the endgame with white, this is a very easy solution here. White to play and draw. This is known as the Philidor defense. He played it perfectly, rook a3. The idea is to prevent my king from going here and then blockading with a pawn, and instead it cuts my king from ever entering the third rank, and I have to commit with this pawn move up one day like this if I ever want to threaten king f3. And once that happens, white knows the solution. You go all the way back to c8, and this is the easiest way to draw this endgame. You just check the king, and my king cannot hide in front of this pawn anymore because my pawn is committed ahead, and that's the entire idea of rook a3, cutting the king initially. You induce this pawn up, and now the king is naked in the back of from the back of the force. So I know this is a draw here. We just trade rooks, and then I stalemate his king for a draw in the first round. Not bad for a first round result. So at the time, I felt good and bad about the result because obviously I checked the game after and I was completely winning, but it's a double round. So you have to stay focused, in the tournament and be like, okay, I got my half point. I disrupted kind of the flow that I was supposed to go through, and now I'll get a nice pairing for my second round. So I'm playing a fellow ex-streamer. I believe he doesn't stream anymore. We didn't talk about it at all, but James Chirilov, known as the Chess Brainiac on Twitch, shout out, was my next pairing. And I know him from Twitch. He's a very strong blitz player. He's like near 3,000 ELO blitz. And he boasts a rating of 2212 FIDE at just like 16 years old or something like this. So very impressive. And he's a FIDE master too. Jeez. But I had the white pieces because I drew with black, which was a good result on paper. And so I played e4, my opponent played c5, and I prepared. He plays a lot of different Sicilians, but I prepared against his main one mostly, which is the Najdorf after pawn to a6. So I went for a system I've never played and a sixth move I've never played, which is bishop e3. If you want this bishop e3, f3, just play f3 first, which is what I always do. But bishop e3 this time has a different idea to it. So when black kicks my knight and I go back, my idea is to play h3 instead of f3 so that you're keeping the knight out, but you're also trying to go g4 instantaneously. And my plan here was g4, and if allowed, g5, h4, and if not allowed, I want to go bishop g2 and f4, said my file. So I memorized this file, this line, right before the game, and after knight bd7, I'm like, okay, I only know like bishop e7 directly things, so I'm kind of out of book, so I go like g4, and this is prep. Like, he didn't see this coming because I have no games like this on the database at all, so it would have been impossible to prep against this. And he plays super confidently in book, like h6. Like, he knows this by heart. And this is where he activated the Resilient Relic. 95 overall, unbroken through the ages. Activate this card when your opponent stumps you with a new line, but you respond with your main weapons, showing resilience and confidence. And that's exactly what James A. Chirilov showed here with h6. Stopping my g5 plan, and I didn't like this anymore, which was a good reflex. And I was out of book here. And here, usually you're supposed to play queen f3, but I didn't like this either. I don't know why I didn't like this. I just didn't like this move. And my book, I checked recently, my line says this, like queen d2, like just normal. Play normal, the casual normal queen d2 here. But I didn't know this at the time, and I played this queen e2, which I know is a thing in some Najdorf positions because you castle long and directly your rook's on the d file. But in this position, it's not. And so my opponent attempts to punish that immediately. He goes b5, and now I go bishop g2. And after bishop c4, I have to play my queen again, so I go queen f3. And black is already better on b4. But my opponent plays rook c8, which is equalizing if I find knight d2, which I didn't. So I castle, which is also inaccurate. And now black is better again. And now black finds this queen c7. So attempting this b4, my knight will move, bishop takes, and then mate on c2. So already looking scary for me. And it's a small edge for the black pieces. Now I need to find king b1, which is not the easiest thing to find on earth, to equalize, only move. And after b4, knight d5, bishop takes, right? The queen is threatening this. E takes, queen takes c2, and king a1 is winning for white because I'm threatening rook c1, which is winning the undefended rook. And if you move anywhere else, let's say queen g6, now there's rook c1 anyways. And if you take, rook takes and rook c8 is threatened, and the king is completely naked and blindsided. And here, I'm assuming we have like a winning thing here. This, and queen e2. And we're just going to take over the entire queen side, and the queen's completely out of play. And if you refuse and you play like rook b8, which is my reflex, knight a5 is +3. What? Because this knight is entering c6, and your king's going to be in the center. And black is completely outplayed. The queen is doing nothing, completely out of play. We're going to probably bring our rooks in and infiltrate. So that's like an insane level trap that I missed. And instead I played rook e2, which is quite passive, defending, and bad. It is losing. My opponent plays b4. My knight goes up to d5. Bishop takes, which knight takes was a little bit better, but he wants to clear the c4 square for himself for this knight to come, like knight b6, knight c4. So bishop takes d5 to me was very logical at the time, and to him too. Takes, and now he goes a5. He plays this very fast, like almost blitzed it out. And I was like, wow, it's just as if I was playing his account on chess.com right now, because he's like blitzing this out. Literally, I'm finishing my move and he's playing his move. Crazy. So here I play king b1, making space for my knight, anticipating a4. And sure enough, he goes right for it. a4, knight c1, and a3. And it's already quite uncomfortable here, right? Like the pawn's on a3. And if I go b3, there's queen c3. So I have to let this pawn take my pawn. So I go h4. I create my own counterattack. My opponent takes. I go knight b3, only move. And now e4. And you're not supposed to know that e4 is a mistake, as neither of us knew this at the time, but it is. And the reason is that black should just be playing solid by now, because I'm completely outplayed on the queen side. All that's left for black is development and a safe king, but my opponent neglects that and plays e4, and a very concrete line. So I play queen f4, hitting continuously this pawn on e4 so that this knight can never like move and commit fully, because I would have queen takes e4. So knight e5, and now I go bishop takes. And now he goes knight c4, and I had seen this very nice rook e2. Okay, better and like slightly winning is bishop d3, which is crazy. Like you're sacrificing an exchange because the king is naked and the bishop pair is just overwhelmingly strong. And yeah, I played rook e2 though, which still plans to bombard this e file, right? And is very strong, because my opponent can't just play the very nice looking knight a3, because I'd have king takes b2 and check. And after king c1, suddenly black has nothing. There's no queen a1. There's no queen takes c2. There's no knight c4, which is the most critical, because here there's bishop d4, which I had seen. And the queen is completely trapped. So my opponent sees all this, of course. He's a strong player and sees that this is losing, actually, and takes my bishop. And this is where the entire game shifts, because suddenly we are equal, because I won this pawn and my opponent won this pawn, but I have a safe king because my opponent's resources are exhausted here. So I have two options, queen takes or rook takes. Which one would you play? I played queen takes. I thought this modified the position of my queen and was better, but rook takes is a little bit stronger apparently. Bishop e7, and now I go for bishop f3. So forcing black to not castle. Is that right? And so now the king stays in the center. So the king goes to f8. James, very ambitious, goes king f8 here. He wants to untangle with rook e8. So I go g5, kicking his knight. And if takes, I would take here, rook takes, and bishop takes. That's what I had. And the knight, I thought, had no great squares. But apparently this is the best line for black. I wonder what for. Rook a8, which is insane. Who finds this while your knight is attacked? And then on takes, it's just equal because of bishop takes. And black is threatening rook takes and stuff. So we both missed this, and he played knight g8. And now look at the board. White is completely winning. This is sufficient for a +2 advantage, although on the board we are equal in material. And these are like the hardest to convert in my experience. So I go rook he1, which is a slight mistake here. But my idea is I don't want anything to untangle. Of course, as any Sicilian player and e4 player, you would know if you're my level above or if you're below my level. It is known that you want to soften up the structure with g6. And on takes, I just couldn't figure out how I stopped bishop f6 and knight here. It looked very scary to me, and it looks like I would give black some air. But here, there's just knight d4, which I completely missed. Like knight d4, and now black is really pressed up against a brick wall. So g6 was the winning move. But I played rook he1, which James told me after the game was a big mistake, because now, after takes, I'm allowing this rook to suddenly come alive from desperate times and go to h4. Defending this, which will be very important later on in the game. And so now I find g6. Thank God, because it's like the last chance I have. This is like a theme throughout the first two games, is that I have a resource. Last game was f5. I have a resource and I can't play it on time. Or I delay it before it's almost too late. But this is still better for me, right? After g6. So he takes, and now I go knight d4. No, I don't. I don't go knight d4 because of something very specific. I had seen queen c3. And after check king f7, I didn't see a way to stop this queen trade. But I missed in my calculation visualizing that this knight is off of d4 and I have queen a7 using that diagonal that was priorly not possible to go to with queen a7. Brilliant move. Threatening knight g5 and sacking the rook for mate. And black has nothing here. King f6 is the best move. You know how depressing your position is when king f6 is the best move? And this would have been a crazy game, but this was not the game. I couldn't find anything after knight d4 and queen c3. I thought my queen had to go something, because otherwise I lose a piece, right? So takes, I played bishop e4, which is quite inferior, and my opponent punishes with bishop f6, defending this. And now my king is not as happy as 2 moves ago. But I go for bishop takes, threatening mate in 2 moves. Knight e7 is the only move to block, and now I go queen g3, defending my bishop. And here my opponent plays queen a7 and is completely winning because rook a8 is coming and I completely missed this resource, and queen takes a2 looks inevitable. So desperately I take like all my time and I go rook e6. And after letting go of the piece, I say to myself, oh my God, my opponent has checkmate in 5 moves. Like I see it and I go, I can't lose to this guy in this way because he's very known for being good tactically. And so my opponent also has like 11 minutes. He takes like a full minute, of which like I'm at the board like this. Like total bluff. I'm like this. Trying not to look at the A2 square. I'm actually looking towards the bishop part of the board to not look at the A2 part of the board, which is very funny bluff tactics when you're losing. And so my opponent has this insane move, sacrificing the queen to checkmate with a queenless game. Rook a8 check, knight a5 is forced. If the king goes here, there's rook a1, knight takes, pawn takes, queen mate. So knight a5, rook takes, king b3, and this rook on h4 is the most important piece of this position as rook a3 is checkmate. James played rook a8. Oh my God, the feeling was crazy. The feeling of seeing rook a8 was crazy, although I still thought I was losing in this position. So it was an odd feeling. It was like a roller coaster. But to me in the game, I'm still not back to neutrality. So I sack my rook. Like this bishop taking up this pawn was all my problems. Pawn takes, and now I take back this pawn here. Best was a4, which who is finding that though? a4, what is the resource? Queen takes is threatening queen a1, and now king takes. Okay, that's really insane. I just played king takes. And my idea is on queen takes a2, king c1, and my king seems completely safe. Like queen a3 check is the only check, and then king d2. And my king looks fine because my knight is around the king. The knight is one of the best pieces, if not the best, to surround the king with, because it just magically takes up all these squares. It's such a good defensive piece. My opponent plays rook h6. Takes a long turn and decides that this is... Actually, I think he changed his evaluation and decides that this is not as clear as it previously seemed. So I go bishop d3. And the position is equal, but we have no clue. I actually think I'm completely losing still. I'm down in exchange, to be fair. Like on paper, it looks completely losing. But my opponent's weak king, is the deciding factor in this game. In fact, f5 is the only move that my opponent has to stay in the game, because I'm threatening this. So f5. Meanwhile, a2 is hanging the entire rest of the game. So I play queen f4, attacking the rook. and threatening this pawn to a certain degree. My opponent plays rook g6, and now I play rook h1. My rook takes the open file, and suddenly this king is like short for squares? I don't know. King g7. Now I go queen h4. My opponent's lack of rook coordination, being an exchange up, is really doing something for me because I'm threatening queen h7, and it's very unobvious how black defends this. So now black takes on d5. And now I had two moves I was considering with like 2 minutes left on the clock. Queen h7 check, which looked very, king f6. It looks like I'm stringing on for checks and etc. Or bishop takes f6, f5. So as knight takes, I take this one, and we trade pawns, and it keeps on being interesting. So after queen h7, after the game, I didn't choose this. After the game, James said to me that he has this, and now queen h8, and now rook here, queen h6, and queen g7. And to him, there's no more checks here, but I have check. Anyways, he said this, and he'll fight up the exchange. He missed, we both missed, but he's the only one who saw this line. He missed that after takes, king g6, king takes g7 is forced because rook takes, there's rook h8 check, which is a skewer, rook g8, and after takes, bishop c4 wins the knight. Because the king is just like randomly misplaced here, and the rook can't do anything to defend this pin. So black would be forced to take back here, and now this allows bishop c4, winning back the exchange into an equal endgame. So his line was flawed. That being said, I played bishop takes f5. I was extremely tired. It was a 4-hour game. Excuses aside, I just missed queen a3, sadly. And I blundered mate here. King b1 and knight c3, and it's mate next move. I was only looking at queen a2 every time, and queen a3 just completely threw by my mind. And I resigned in this position. And of course, you check the engine. This is day one still, because it was double round on every day. So I checked the engine for both games, and I realized on the first day of the tournament, I was winning in both games, playing up, like completely winning, and I missed both wins, which is quite sad. But I was feeling very energetic coming into the third round because I'm actually doing well within the doing badly. So round 3, I'm also playing up. This tournament, I played up every single game. Gives you an indication what the rest of the tournament looks like. It's a good tournament, don't worry. So I'm playing my first international player, an English player called Joshua Altman, who was a chess prodigy when he was growing up. When he was 12, he got CM or something, and now he's 2150, still very strong. So I prepared something very, very shocking. On d4, I go knight f6, c4, e6, and on knight f3, I played the Benoni defense. Insane. The modern Benoni, as some call it. d5, takes, and now d6. And here, my opponent plays h3, which is a very prophylactic move. He's preventing bishop g4, bishop takes. And after g6, he plays the reverso. If we're both lost, I'm home. Use this when your opponent plays a total surprise they have never played before. Targeting your normal opening moves, immediately reverse the situation by playing a new opening so both of you are clueless. So I prepped the Benoni against him, which is completely out of left lane compared to my games in my database. And now he plays completely what he doesn't play normally, pawn to e4. So I look at e4 and I say to myself, I think I can play a6 here. So I play a6, which if my opponent usually prevents this b5 thing with a4, now I would be able to win a pawn. So my opponent kind of has to concede this b5, which is in the Benoni seen as a major, major achievement. Although in this line, ouch. a4, b4, castles is +2 for white. Of course, we're both out of book, so he castles. I go bishop g7, and now knight c3. And now I go castles, bishop f4, and rook e8. So this is in line with what he usually plays, but he just didn't play the right move order, and he didn't play the usual system that he plays. But this is very strong. I mean, white is doing very well. So rook e1, and now I go bishop b7. And overall, I would say this is my worst game of the tournament because I was never better once. I was never even equal. And my opponent just played marvelously the whole way through. And I never even had a shot. I mean, I could go over this game for another 30 minutes, as I have for the first two. But I will just leave it at that we both went down on time, and I was just losing the entire way through. And the game ended very poorly. And after bishop a6, my opponent played bishop b6, trapping my queen, and I was forced to resign. Actually, no, I played more moves out of frustration. But then, down a queen. Damn. And we move to the greater part of the tournament. The second half of the tournament is a little bit better than this. Game 4 of the tournament. I am playing FM Jaden Shah from Jamaica, so my second international flag in the tournament. And I have a bad tournament so far. I'm not so happy, but I'm still being stoic. So on to the next round. No emotion. I try my best. No emotion. Think of other things. What helped me a lot this tournament is during tough times, I was with friends between the rounds. So it took my mind off the losses. And when I was up, like when I was winning, I was with friends. So it took my mind off the wins. And I didn't feel that overconfidence that I usually do. So get yourself some friends. So Jaden Shah plays the French defense. So e4, e6, d4, and after d5, knight c3. And he goes into the winnower. And after e5, he plays c5, a3. And now he plays one of two things. So this is what he normally plays, but around 1 year ago, I didn't have many games on Jaden. Around 1 year ago, he played this in the Olympiad for Jamaica. And this is called the Armenian variation. I very much like this variation because I myself am a quarter Armenian. But it's bad. It's a bad variation for black because of modern engines who have solved that b4 here is an insane resource for white. I don't think actually engines solve this. Humans figure this out, but it's an insane resource regardless. White gains a big edge from b4. C takes. If takes here, white goes knight b5, giving a3 with check, and c3 will regain this pawn, be down a pawn, but knight d6 will be coming in, and queen g4, and it's like over. It's like advantage for white. So black has to take this pawn on d4. And now I go knight b5 because this bishop is still attacked, and my knight was attacked, and the bishop goes down to c7, attacking my pawn. I go f4, bishop d7, and this was my calling to take the bishop in my line, and now I go knight f3. So I'm down a pawn because I sacrificed the pawn on d4, but I'll eventually regain it very peacefully with bishop d3, bishop b2, queen d2, queen f2 if I must. And that was, I didn't memorize concrete lines here, because he plays different stuff within this, or it's very flexible for black. But I memorized that after queen f2, I should be regaining this pawn on d4, as so many of my pieces are aiming to recapture. And once I recapture the pawn, I have a space advantage, I have a knight blockading d4, and it should be better for white. So understanding the plans and not the concrete moves only. And so throughout this entire opening, I activated the Lion's Den, where courage meets claws. Fearlessly enter your opponent's main line to punish what they know best. Be theory ready and know more than them. So bishop a4, which is a very classic way of putting this bishop in this line to redirect it at a weakness where this should be usually a bad bishop, but now it's like an okay bishop on the side of the board. Bishop d3, knight e7, he develops, and I play bishop b2, aiming to recapture. And here, I don't know book. We're both out of book completely, it seems, because I should just be playing takes and outplaying with bishop c5. But to me, apparently king safety was more important, which is good in principle if you're like religious and biblic about chess. But in practice, takes is much better for white. Because now after knight c6, I can't take with the bishop anymore. It would cost me my bishop pair that I am entitled to in this opening once I regain this pawn fully. So queen d2, bishop b5, and now I play queen f2, which was my plan that I had rehearsed. But here I have a4, forcing the bishop to take, and after c takes, I'll just put my second rook on this file and open this up on the queen and be better. But I play queen f2, and this equalizes for black, knight f5, and I realize now it's kind of awkward. Like, I take twice, and okay, I have a space advantage, but the less pieces are left on the board, the easier for black it is to equalize, and the happier black is. You see, when you have low space in chess, you want to trade off pieces and favor the endgame. And that's the case for black. They've managed to trade off all the minor pieces, and this endgame is now more and more favorable and easier to equalize for black. But I am still threatening to win the file or play f5. So my opponent has to concede one of them in this position, and he concedes the f5 push. So I go pawn to f5, and now takes, and now rook takes, and now queen c3, which is forcing some stuff. So trade queens, and I go rook af1. And here I had seen all this from moves back, and I had calculated that there's really only one move here for black that equalizes very cleanly. Even though there are several, but castles to me is the cleanest. Both pieces defend this pawn at the ready, and he might have been scared of e6, but after rook c7, there's really nothing to worry about. Like, rook e7 is going to come next, and I'm going to be forced to trade this off. And I was even a little bit scared, because here after rook e7, it seems to me that the king endgame is better for black, because this king gets here first. So I was anxious about castles, but my opponent plays very fast here and plays the move I least liked, which I was hoping for, rook c7, defending this f7 pawn, and it looks like I have nothing offensively, but this let me do the most important thing in this position. In a rook endgame, the aggressiveness of your king, it can be worth the world, can make the difference. And to me, I had visualized the ideal square for my king, which was king d4. So I just marched. King f2, he played king e7, which is not a great move. King e3, king e6, and now king d4. My king on d4 is an absolute hero. It is safe from all checks from the front and from behind and from the side. Black has no way to open up this king side and check me, and black has no margin to check me from c4. While putting pressure on this d5 pawn. Talk about a stronger king, I can't even think of one. So my opponent went h6, and now the rest of the game is pretty much a prophylactic display. So I go g4, strengthening my rook, but also just trying to outplay these pawns with a minority attack, 2 against 3. So rook hc8, and now I have h4, preparing g5. So the way I win this, I realize, is by creating this pawn to move and win with rook f6 check, in which I would win this pawn or win this pawn, or make this weak. So this takes, forcing takes, and then rook f6 check, winning this pawn, or this pawn, or this pawn, like winning everything. So this king side, my opponent realizes now, is very weak. I'm like g5 away from threatening to win. So he goes back to h8. And this is the entire pattern. I go h5, he goes rook h7, he's preparing against g5, and this rook would be like very well prepared, defending g7 and not forcing black to commit to g6. That would give like this nice square to my rook. But this rook, although it's a logical move, is terribly placed. And I make use of that. I develop on the queen side now. a4, I want to gain this square for my king in the endgame. So I go a4, b6, and now I do a pattern. I do a kind of maneuver with my rook. I go back, which he has no moves, so he's going back here. and I go to g2 to threaten this. So once again, he goes rook h7 to defend this prophylactically, but his rook is now out of play where my rook is still in play, and I use this to play rook b2. I want to go a5 without him having this file. So I play rook b2 to take that file first. So he goes down, and now I can play a5. And he doesn't like this. He plays rook b8, which is great because this gives me what I want. But after rook b8, I play rook b1. And takes, I would take, and I gain the file, the b file. So now he capsizes and he plays b5. And right when this happens, I'm like, yes. I go back. So rook f2. I want to go rook f5, g5 maybe. Rook c8. And now I go rook f1. So I put pressure on this when black can't even think of invading me. My rooks are on time. Hitting this. And now he's like depressed in his chair. He was depressed for most of this endgame because it's really not fun to play for black. He went rook h8, now playing passively and defensively against this plan. But now this plan works better for me. Rook g2, rook h7. And now that this is all decided, this allows me, it's like a revolving puzzle. It's brilliant how chess is, especially this endgame. This allows me to play rook ff2, and now this rook is late to the council. I am threatening rook c2 to invade on this file with rook c5, and then my other rook is coming in. And it's virtually over in an equal rook endgame. It's +4 here. A little sample, perhaps. Rook h2, rook h8, rook c2, rook c8, takes, and now g5. Now the rooks are off of this. I have traded one pair of rooks. And now I can take and play rook f2, and I'm just getting rook f6 in, king takes, and rook takes. It's completely over. So he sees this and basically gives up. Well, I mean, every move gives up, right? So he plays f6. And now it permits me to take, play check, and attempt to win this pawn, which I do after rook here. I'm just threatening this, and every pawn here is weak. My mission is successful, and I go with check. And I just win this rook endgame super easily. He resigns after playing his own move. And this is my first win of the tournament, my first big win of the tournament. Remember, I'm playing up. Like, this guy has 60 points on me, and I win, which is fantastic for my rating. It makes up for the 2 last losses in the tournament. So I'm like break even after 4 rounds, which is pretty good. And I get a nice pairing the nice round because I get a nice pairing every round. So we move on to game number 5, in which I played against someone who later became my friend, and we're friends to this day, Daniel Gersh. After my game against James Chirilov, we were talking in the hall, and we were talking about how much I was winning, mostly, and a certain Daniel Gersh comes towards us, and he says, "Did you win?" to James? And James says, "Yeah, somehow." And Daniel goes, "You won that?" And I was like, bro, I'm right here. So that gives you kind of an idea who Daniel Gersh is. Daniel Gersh is a very experienced player. He was master level when he was 12. I think he got national master when he was 12. And so he has all these types of weapons. And so this is how he played. d4, knight f6. First preparation thing, because my opponents are used to d5, remember? So this is the first move out of the gate for them. And so then he was worried here. He was worried I would go for an absolute win with the King's Indian. But I didn't. Knight f3, e6, c4, and now I go d5. So preparing for a Catalan. And I knew that this was a version of the Catalan that he had not prepared for, because usually I go d5, e6, c6, and the Catalan triangle. So my opponent goes g3. And now I go bishop e7, and now he goes bishop g2. And so I go castles. And on castles, I had prepared my first move that would get us both out of book. But my opponent here activates the flexible octopus for the second time this tournament. Tentacles weave, theory snaps. Combat your opponent's mainline opening with a flexible sideline to steer away from the bulk of your opponent's knowledge. And that is exactly what Mr. Gersh played here, knight c3. Knight c3 I know less of. I know I can equalize with d takes, knight e5, and c5, which is usually how you would play in the Catalan. In a lot of main lines, actually, you take on c4 and play c5. This is not a great version of it. After knight c3, I want to play c5 directly, which is one thing. And after knight e6, you want knight c6, which is another way to play but still fight. But after c5, which I didn't know much of already, d takes, queen takes, check, knight takes. We trade the queens, which I was like, okay, I kind of want this. I'm playing 200 points up, nearly. And I've got the queens off the board. An endgame could be easier to play. So I take this pawn, we trade, and then knight c6. And then my opponent plays bishop e3. Very fast, by the way, he's still in book. And now I have a problem. I realize I have a problem. My bishop is super passive. And it will be hard for me to untangle and make this bishop good enough to fight the great, strong Catalan bishop that is sitting in its tower on g2. So bishop e3, I don't want to help my opponent's development with takes, and then weaken my dark square. So I go bishop e4, which apparently is still book. Bishop d2, he plays this immediately, and then we trade. Okay. This is where Daniel leaves book. So we're both now like out of book. I can't believe I played through like 3 moves of not knowing book, but great. Now I have to figure out how I get this bishop to like c6 while moving this knight and not giving this pawn. This is the way to do it, and you'll tell me if this is reasonable. Bishop d7, knight c3, rook d8, and then you play knight e7. Basically, white can't take this pawn because you win it back. And now bishop c6. And now black is equal. So it's very hard to do. It looks very simple, but it's very hard to do. You have to basically time when the knight gets out of this d1 square and undefends the b2 pawn to then play knight e7 and let this possibility happen. But I played e5, which was my first mistake, allowing bishop takes, but he didn't play it here. He played first castles. I developed my bishop. This was my way to get my bishop out, but it allows bishop takes c6, b takes, and a huge weakness creation on this c6 square. I now have an isolated pawn on an open file, which was the concession I was willing to give for an active piece. I hate passive play. Like, if you know anything about me, I hate having my pieces passive. That's usually how I lose. So this was a major concession, major, that I was willing to give up. Objectively, this is still equal with a small edge for white. Knight e3. So I play knight d5. I want to kind of trade this, but if not, like knight c4, now I have f6. So now I have like a strong pawn wall, whereas before, I didn't really like that this pawn was kind of vulnerable and hard to defend. But white just piles onto this pawn. So he goes knight a5 first, which I have a resource. My resources are all hard to find. Rook fb8. And when he defends with b3, right, there's no trade that's going to happen here. Now I have rook b5. Sacking this pawn, but not really, because after knight takes, there's rook c5. And the knight is quite trapped. And white will have to give back this pawn with e4 and takes. And now I love this position for black, of course. It's a dream. So I miss this resource, and instead I play c5. I have an idea. You see, when rook fc1, I want to go rook fc8, and after knight e4, I have c4. And now this fork doesn't work because I have this c3. So knight here, c3 equalizes. Insane. Because after takes, I have rook takes, using my rook that's attacked to take. But if knight takes, now I have this. And suddenly I'm winning. But this is tricks only against a 2200. And knight takes c4 is played. And I play knight c3, which tries, but overall, once this pawn is gone, it's extremely hard for black to make up for it. And it's a fight for the open file, which I lose after knight d5, takes. And yeah, my last chance here is maybe keeping a second, both rooks on the board. You don't want to trade rooks when you're down a pawn, because this endgame is easier for white to convert than if we trade these two pieces off and we have a rook endgame, then that would be closer to a draw. But yeah, I felt the need to play rook c8 here because rook c7 is coming, and now rook c7 is a really nice move, which I had seen, but it's losing anyways type thing, like knight takes, and white has a beautiful combination. I only have 2 moves here with my bishop, but both surrender to knight b5, attacking my pawn and threatening knight d6. Same for if my bishop was on b7. And so I play bishop d7, try to trap this knight, but he's up 2 pawns and he can just give one or both of the pawns back in exchange for going at my queenside pawns. So very good game sense. I take a pawn, but it is too little too late. This pawn is forced down the board. If bishop takes, there's knight c5. This pawn is forced down the board and forcing in so my bishop down the board, and now knight e8. And now my pawns fall like a pile of dominoes. And overall, this is one of the cleanest games that I have ever played against, lost against in the past months. I mean, white has no clear mistakes and just put pressure on a difficult equal position in which I had to find a way to untangle to get out of it. And white played phenomenal. So another loss. I have 1.5 out of 5. I play up next round against Aiden Reese, which I saw before the game is an absolute rare card. Ladies and gentlemen, I played e4, my opponent played c5, and we went into this 4-knight Sicilian. And we now play like 11 more moves of theory. So my opponent activated what we call the Systemist. Different face, same fate. Activate this card when you achieve supreme memorization, knowledge, and understanding of the openings you master. Preparing against you is easier, but your knowledge expands so much wider. The Systemist has basically memorized one opening or 2 openings and memorized everything. And that's the case for my opponent. He memorized the 4 knights. So bishop c5. I played knight d6 check, and this is all theory, which I'm glancing over because this is all prep. Bishop d4, bishop b3, rook c8, I castle, bishop takes, b takes, and now knight e7. Bishop takes because the knight is threatening this pawn. And basically what we get at the end of this, like in the last video in which we had the Systemist, is a completely synthetic position. So queen d7, f4, and he plays e4. He finds this incredible resource in 1 second. He's playing everything so fast. He has like an hour and 36 minutes on the clock. Queen takes, knight takes, and I'm out of book actually here because I had only prepared against rook c5 and takes, rook takes. And to me, it looks like I'm just losing a pawn here. But that's what I prepared. But my opponent had e4 takes, and here my opponent is out of book because he knows it till draw, right? But after rook f3, which defends this, my opponent is finally out of book. He told me after the game that he knows only bishop d5, which is crazy. I would not like consciously let this happen unless I knew every line here, right? So 20 moves of opening theory laid on the board, and the resulting position is that of one of the ugliest I have ever seen in my life. Black has a king on f8 that's defended by 2 isolated pawns, upon which is a knight that's defended by a queen that's so solid, it's hard to get this knight out of here, and that knight is an elementary piece to this position because it defends the other 2 isolated pawns in this huge weakness. My position is I have the best bishop in the world, arguably, pointing at f7, and I have pretty nice, reasonable rook activity and a centralized queen, but objectively, this is completely equal. 0-0-0s because we have both used very, very strong engines, and that's it's an opening theory battle. A theoretical battle, as they say, right? So my opponent's out of book. He takes his first long turn out of book, plays rook e8. And the reason why he took a long time is that he said to me after the game, after bishop d5, I'm supposed to play rook takes c3. But if you defend, I don't see how I don't keep my rook on this c3 square. So he was like, I have to play rook e8. So I played queen c4. I didn't want to play queen d5 because this allows rook e2. So I didn't want to give that up for nothing. So I played rook queen c4 first, threatening bishop a2 still, which is another great thing about queen c4 rather than queen d5, is that I have this small threat. And so after b5, which is forced, now I go queen d3, and b5 is committed. Like, I created an extra weakness above the 4 other weaknesses that are in this position, I create another weakness. So rook g8, a4. If takes, bishop takes, right? So I'm pressuring like the 5th weakness on the queen side. And I had seen like nothing dangerous here against me. Up until my opponent plays this move that made me take a 30-minute turn. Queen b7. Whoa! Here I'm expecting a6 takes, and then rook a6, and I'm coming in here. But my opponent plays nah, sacking a pawn, but also axing the queen on this, but also sacking a knight. But if I take the knight, there's queen takes f3. And also has like knight h4 coming in, which is really absurd. And I proceed to take, thinking I'm winning. I'm absolutely sure I'm winning at this point. Thinking I'm winning, I take a 35-minute turn in this position and actually get myself into some reasonable time pressure. And finally, like I looked at so many moves. I looked at this. I looked at this. I looked at bishop here, which I didn't like. I looked at queen d5, which I liked the best, but never fully worked out because of a very specific resource. I looked at takes, of course. And finally, I'm like, okay, I played queen d5. And it's not the best move, but everything's equal here. So queen takes, bishop takes, and I was really scared of knight e3. And this is extremely concrete. Knight e3 forks these 2 pieces, which I was fully committed to, and allows me bishop c6. And here I had rook e7. Still defending this knight, kind of forced. I also looked at rook e6. And now my opponent is threatening this. But if I can take this, like the queen side is green lit, like I'm completely winning. So I had this in mind, rook e1 first. That's the truth. And on knight takes, I have rook takes, king takes, and rook g3 or king f2. And I finally came to the conclusion that king f2 prepares rook g3 and traps the knight and forces knight h4. But now I would have check, and it's a nice game because I can win this pawn. So my opponent would have to do this, and then I found this move that was so annoying in my analysis. So annoying. Sacking a rook, but if I take this, rook takes e1, and it's kind of like not pleasant. And if I take here, the rook is not hanging because rook takes h2, king here. Rook takes back the rook, and rook g3 aims to win a piece, but rook h4 saves on time. But takes at the end, and I'm winning. So the equalizing move is f5, and on rook takes, f takes, king takes, and b takes a, bishop takes, and h5 is equal. Absolute cinema. Absolute cinema. Let's get back to the game. I played queen d3 and takes. This knight e3, which was like the only move. It is the only move that black has to remain equal. He doesn't play. He plays b takes a instantly. So then I block knight e3, which is the obvious threat with king f2, best move. Knight back to e7, and suddenly a brain fog, and I can't find the best move for my bishop, the best square. I look at this. I look at this. I look at this. I look at bishop a2. Bishop a2 is a no because I want to take this one day. But every move just seemed to give black some activity. And I didn't compute what the best move is yet. But I think it's this, allowing this, and then I'll take back the... I'm down a pawn here. Like, I'm just taking back this pawn. And to me, it was like black is untangling super fast. King g7, rook b8, and I don't have any advantage to play for. So here I played c4. No, here I played rook d3, defending the bishop. And my idea was on knight takes, rook takes. On... what did I have? Oh, yeah. My idea was on rook e4, which is the obvious move. You're attacking this and defending. I had rook d4. And now takes. I liked this endgame. I think I was winning. My opponent played rook c8. And I was like, Thing is, my opponent offered a draw here. And I was still here. And I was still not sure if I really wanted to draw because of this rook e4, rook d4. But after rook c8, I was like, oh my god, I'm in trouble. slightly. So I offer the draw, but I like try to claim the draw on my turn, and he's like, no, you play your move, which was a good game sense thing by him. So I go rook a3, I reoffer the draw, and he concludes that, yeah, like I'm just going to play rook a5, win this, pressure this, and it's going to be completely equal. And we agree to a draw. Insane game. I mean, 20 moves of theory and 10 moves of non-theory. More theory than non-theory in a chess game is crazy sauce. But I only had one moment in which I was clearly better, and it was this bishop b7 stuff, and I forgave myself in time for the next round, in which I played Jesse Wren. All I knew about Jesse Wren is that he played my friend Kostya in blitz games that I found on YouTube, which I was happy because my friend played him. And Kostya, who's an IM, lost to Jesse Wren on the second game of the blitz of the two blitz games. My opponent Jesse Wren is a d4 player. He plays d4. And to me, it looks like he spent all night to play e4 for the first time. But Jesse doesn't watch my videos. So he doesn't know that I play everything these days, and not just committed to what is only on the database e5. I play the Caro-Kann as well. I play the French as well. I play the Sicilian as well. You'll see a Sicilian by me by the end of this tournament. I promise you that. So I play the Caro-Kann and immediately activate the reverso. If we're both lost, I'm home. Use this when your opponent plays a total surprise they have never played before, targeting your normal opening moves. Immediately reverse the situation by playing a new opening so both of you are clueless. And Jesse, who doesn't play e4 usually, now plays knight c3, d5, knight f3, takes, and knight f6, to which he goes queen e2. So I've played the Caro-Kann like 5 times in OTB practice so far. And in 4 of the 5 games, and 3 of the 4 games, I had this variation of the Caro-Kann, which to me is not the main variation at all. I guess it's the trend these days at the 2000, 2200 level. I don't know. I take the knight, queen takes, and by now I have 2 games under my belt at this time of playing it. And one of the games I played queen d5, and the other I played queen a5. Queen a5 will never be on the database. I knew that. Whereas queen d5 might one day be on the database. But I had a really interesting game with queen a5 and even got an advantage. That was like a month ago. I didn't show this on the channel. But I play queen a5 now. And the idea of queen a5 is very special. Recommended by David Howell, who's the 2nd or 3rd of Magnus Carlsen. And Magnus has even played this a couple times in Blitz. The idea is that you want to play bishop f5 to then develop with bishop e7, e6, and castles without your bishop being behind the pawn structure, which is often an occurrence here. White's normal move is like bishop c4, bishop e2, c3, anything else. But he plays b4, which is not at all in my file. Not at all. But it's very logical. It destabilizes my queen from continuously hitting with bishop f5, and it's not like I want to play queen h5 to do this. So now I'm between 2 moves. Queen d5, which is the other move I had, but only leaving a b4 pawn on the board, which seems like extra good stuff for white, or queen f5. And I debated this for like 10 minutes. So I'm already using 10 minutes of my time. The right move is queen d5, when after queen takes and pawn takes, this pawn will lose white a tempo. Which seems obvious when I say it now, but it's, yeah, I didn't want to concede the original position with it. But yeah, this and black is completely equal because of 2 central pawns versus 1, which is great. And if you don't take and play the normal queen f4, now there's e5. That's the idea I missed. So e5 with the discovered attack on this b4 pawn, when queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes is equal. And if knight takes, which still secures this pawn, bishop d6 pins the knight to the queen. The queen is saving this f7 square. And after d4, f6 wins the knight. I know it for next time. But before, I played queen f5, which is not great. My opponent played queen e3, kind of tempting me to take. but I looked deeply into taking for like another 10 minutes. Like, I'm not doing good on the clock here. And he's not doing great either because it's not his opening. So he's like taking some time as well. He's cautious. I looked a long time at this, and there's no way I could justify winning this pawn. My queen would have to basically exile herself from the board, go to a4, and my opponent would have like 3 tempi of development on like a completely naked king. Like, I couldn't do that to myself. But if I don't take, it's very hard to justify this position for myself because white will just kick my queen for a 3rd time this game, and I'll be so down in development, it'll be embarrassing. So I played knight d7. My opponent plays bishop here, and now I play queen g4, and I'm like knight d7 was a bad move. Like, the only move here was queen e6, begging white to go into an endgame. So knight d7 was bad because my queen continuously gets chased, and now like I'm forking these 2 pawns, haha. But after my opponent plays bishop b2, I literally get greedy and take this pawn. Objectively, white has full compensation for the pawn and the small edge. So it's a very thin margin of error for me. Like one bad move and it'd be like +2. My opponent plays bishop c3, which I didn't like. Like, you castle. Don't modify the square of your... My queen is badly placed. At least rook b1. I don't know. I didn't like bishop c3. I went back to b... It allows me to go back to b6, and the way that black can get to an endgame or be a full pawn up is by using the initiative, using the tempting of the queen trade, right? The proposition of the queen trade on and on and on, and activity of my pieces to equalize with development, because I'm down in development, I'm down in space, and I'm down in my queen being weak. If I can do the reverse of all that, I'll be great. I'll be equalizing. And sure enough, my opponent had to tease me to play c5 and then just go back for the advantage, which was hard to find, and instead played queen f4, and now it's equal. I equalize with knight f6. That kind of takes up all these knight e5 tricks on my f7 pawn, but instead I liked this move a lot, which is not great. Hits the bishop and is again what I'm talking about, this initiative that I'm continuously looking for. And on bishop c4, obviously escaping me trying to win the bishop pair, I had bishop e6. And now he should just castle. And white has full compensation and then some for the pawn. But he plays knight g5. Threatening bishop takes and queen takes. But he missed bishop takes c4. And I think... So there was 3 moments in the game. This is the first moment where my opponent, bang! Super loud bang on the board. He like missed bishop takes c4 and the fact that it still defends this or something like this. And so he's pissed. He's like frustrated out of his mind. Plays queen takes, and now I play e6. And now it seems that I traded off a pair of bishops. I want trades. I want the most trades possible. Traded off a pair of bishops, and it seems like I can survive this. I was looking feverishly at queen f4, which is very, very sharp. He took a long time here. On queen f4, f6 is my only move to defend this. Believe it or not, I don't have queen c7. And bishop takes. And here I have to find h6 to be better. But I looked at this line, which was extremely crazy. And I thought I was winning with black. But turns out white has an only move, queen c3, to get out of this, which is still not obvious. After this, queen takes c5, which I completely missed. My knight was hanging. But this was like 10 moves in the future, right here. And my opponent played castles instead. And I was like, that's not at all what I calculated. And so now I play bishop e7 very quickly. I want to castle. If I can castle up a pawn, I'll be over the moon. So queen g4. I play bishop f6. My opponent plays queen h5. So attacking this, I just defend it normally. Rook ae1. And now I take this bishop. And I think, bang! Bang number 2 on the table. The 2 boards from either side look at us. He's banging that loud. Like, he's banging pieces. He missed that here, he can't play knight takes. This loses on the spot, in fact. After knight takes, rook takes, check. I have king f8, which I had seen. And on queen c5 check, aiming to regain the bishop, I have king g8. And there's no checkmate, of course. But you can't gain back the bishop that I'm up because I just take the rook. And now white has two ideas. Queen takes a7 and rook e7. Let's go with queen takes a7 first. The most fun one. If I take, it's mate, obviously. But if I just play queen c8, it's over, like lights out. I defend my rook and I attack this queen, which I did a puzzle that was similar to this in a Dvoretsky book recently. That was like exactly this, which is crazy. I can show you actually. Bez, remind me to send you the picture of that. And rook e8 has a really nice tactic, bishop d4, which I had also seen, saving my bishop. And if rook takes, bishop takes, and I'm up a piece. And if queen takes here. And if the queen just moves, I can just move my queen defending the bishop. And so this doesn't work. He realizes it, and he has to deal with bishop takes, d takes, and suddenly I'm better. I'm up a pawn, and white has nothing to show for here. g6, a little bit less good of a move than queen e7, which I was not patient enough to play. And now h6 was the best move, but I play queen e7. Now my opponent plays queen f4. And I still can't castle, or so I thought. Here I can castle along because after knight takes, I missed rook h takes, rook h f8, winning the piece. And castles, queen takes, there's no queen takes because queen takes knight. And now I play h6, ill-timed because my opponent plays knight takes f7. And here I'm like, oh my god, I had been looking at knight takes f7 things the entire time that the queen and knight were here, because there's always like some queen e5 things, but it never so happened that queen e5 was not check picking this up. So I think, and I'm like, oh my god, queen e5. And my opponent will equalize, and I'll have an isolated pawn, I'll have to castle long, and I'll have to be fighting for a draw. I look at castles doesn't work. I look at rook f8 doesn't work. So I take. And now my opponent takes like 2 minutes more than he should. In this game, when your opponent's low on time, I'm low on time, you should play the tactic as fast as possible. And he takes 2 minutes, clearly deciding between this or this. And in those 2 minutes, I think to myself, oh no, he's thinking too long for this turn on an obvious move. He must not like something that I have. Literally, this is what happened. And I discovered, sure enough, that on queen e5, I have queen f8. For the record, I was prepared on queen e5 to castle long. But suddenly I have queen f8, like a magical move that defends both these pieces, which normally you would never have. Like unchess. It's unchess. And so he plays this, and I play queen f8, and bang! A third time! What do you do in that situation when your opponent is literally raging? I don't know. I thought of calling the TA, but the last time I called the TA on my opponent, it didn't go well for me for the rest of the game because my mindset was completely off from the game and was on to the drama, right? So I just stuck to my game. I was like, fuck this. So now my opponent played rook. He's pissed. Livid. Like he's showing it with every single nonverbal trait, and he's loud. Yeah. So I play b6, solidifying my knight. My knight is the hero of this game. It's defending everything here. It's the hero of this position. f4, he still has some things to play for. I go rook h7. This rook will be very nice to cover up, patch the game. Now I play rook f7, which was my idea. Now my opponent can't use this pawn because I have mate. So queen c4. And now I defend this pawn with rook c8. Rook d1, seemingly giving this. But I play rook e7, very passive. But he takes, and now I go queen f6, attacking this rook. Queen defends the rook, and now I can take this pawn, and now he plays queen e4 because I'm attacking the queen. So queen e4, and now knight f8. I took a long time to find this. This one, he's pissed. He's also like showing, he's like... because he was expecting that on rook takes, queen takes, he would at least win the pawn, and my king would be unsafe. But now I'm threatening to go like this. Not now because of rook f1, but in the future. So he goes queen g4, attacking my rook, and I go rook c7. We trade off a pair of rooks, and now he goes queen g3. And I think there's still like a small trap here. No, I just go king f7. Rook e1 and then check. This, rook e7, rook f1, and then my king is safe. My king is safe, up a full piece. He goes queen b8, and then I go queen f5, which is nice. If rook takes, there's mate. But it doesn't work well because of king g1. So queen here, this. And now I have the same idea as queen f5, but only taking up the g1 square. You can guess it, is queen f2. Queen f2 is a banger. It just wins on the spot. But I couldn't find it. So I played knight d7, which, you know, queen f2 was completely winning. But my opponent played queen d8, and after queen e5, knight f6, my knight is coming here. It's completely over. My opponent resigns, and this is my second big win of the tournament. I currently have 2.5 out of 6, and I'm not only breaking even, I'm maybe small plus, like +1 FIDE point on the tournament. But every day's a double round, and so is this. So I head into the next game wanting to win because I don't like offsetting a win with directly a loss. It's so frustrating. Like all your hard work is uncompensated for. So I play my third flag of the tournament, Adu Oladapo, who is from Nigeria and is an older man. He's, I think, in his 60s or 50. I think he turned 50 this year. And he's 21-31 at this point of the tournament. 21-35, my fault, FIDE. And he's from Nigeria. So Adu plays mostly the same thing against e4. So we go into this Con Sicilian, marked by the move a6. And I play this Maroczy bind, which is my first movement of preparation. I don't usually play this against the Con. So queen c7, I go with this a3, preventing this bishop b4. This can be super annoying. You can't allow this. b6, and now I go bishop d3, which is an unusual system. Bishop b7, f3, and now my opponent activates the sideline specialist, bishop d6. 90 overall, use this card when you target an opponent using a relatively new opening. Use the sideline from a master game to surprise your opponent out of their preparation. And that's what my opponent is doing. This is like a system that I don't know about at all. We're going to put back the eval bar. And this bishop d6, I don't know much of. And it's very unfamiliar, and it doesn't taste good because g6 looks like a weakness. h3 looks like a weakness because of bishop g3. The best move is like b4, ignoring this. Bishop takes and knight de2, which is like, what? Like we're allowing check? But then takes, queen takes, and king f1 is +1. Like type system. You see what I'm saying? So I play g3, obviously knowing that it's an inaccuracy, but I didn't know this. So he plays h5 now. And now I play queen e2. To h4, I had g4 already ready. I'm playing so fantastically against this knight. I'm very happy about this. And my opponent plays bishop e5. I go bishop e3. And now he goes knight c6. And here, I have an option whether to take, which I don't want trades in the Con because I have more space. So I want to keep pieces on the board. But I don't want to necessarily do this and just give like this double isolated pawns, right? So I decided to defend, which was not good because it allows this really unusual tactic, queen d6. And suddenly I have to make a few concessions, positional concessions, to not give up a piece here, which is crazy. My opponent missed it and played rook b8, to which I went b4. There's no queen here anymore, but yeah, I had a chance at advantage after knight de2. Okay, okay. I don't know why it's so winning. My opponent plays d6 now. The bishop is like in front of the pawn structure, but on e5. So unnatural. So unnatural. Any chess player will tell you that. So I went rook c1. Axing my rook on this queen. I also didn't like d6 because there's no diagonal anymore for black. So this is kind of off. The bishop is like in no man's land. So he trades a few pieces off the board and then goes king e7 instantly. What? That was my literal reaction inside my head. So king e7, how do you reply to king e7? Queen e3 is the best move. And the engine gives knight d7, f4, which is crazy. But I went castles. Like you punish king e7 with castles, very logical. I'm a human. g5 he plays instantly. I'm on my toes. And now I play kind of a tricks only move, but kind of also useful. Rook e1. Amon Hambleton said that in the Maroczy bind, this was quite controversial, I'm not sure, said that your rooks belong on E1 and C1, whereas most people think it's C1 and D1. But he says it's C1 and E1 because in the Maroczy bind, your pawn will either go like this or your pawn here will either go like this, and you need a rook on each of those files of which it will be opened up on. So, okay, I had the Amon Hambleton concept in mind, and I played rook fe1 here. Then my opponent played knight d7. So rook e1, it's threatening some things like this, but it's not forceful. My opponent plays knight d7 here. Knight d7 has the option to go knight e5. And so my previous threat now looks even better because knight e5, there's no knight anymore to defend this. So I take like 25 minutes. Knight d5 check. It's thematic for the Maroczy bind to sack your knight here, but it's not recommended. But there's a king here, so maybe it is recommended. So my opponent clearly thought that on takes, my idea was takes. But then on knight e5, I have absolutely nothing. My idea here is c takes. Going on the ambiguous and kind of wacky position of this queen here. Very unpleasant for black. You can give a piece back anytime, but of course black wants to win, so my opponent plays queen d8 immediately. And this was my idea. Pawn to e5. And here I had seen so many beautiful things. D takes, rook takes e5 check, and on king here I have rook e8 sacrificing my rook. And also this was sacrificed. We'll look at that too. On king takes, I have check. Knight here, check, king here, and this is mate. And on king here, it's mate. And on queen takes, it's check, king here, and rook e1, winning the queen. And on knight here, it's queen takes, king here, checkmate. This is all what I was calculating for those 25 minutes. And takes queen here, if not king here for mate, king here, we just win this. And this will be mate. Something like this here. This is winning. Like this is plus 10. Except I didn't think of one thing here. My opponent doesn't have to take. Although it's threatening so many things, my opponent can play king f8, which he played almost instantly. And suddenly, I'm like, oh no. Because when you put the eval bar, and when I take another 15-minute turn to realize, black is better. Thing is about attacking chess is that once it's a real attacking position, which this is, it's a real attacking position, although objectively black is better. When you get a attacking position, the margin of error for black to defend is very thin. And my next moves will go exactly on that. Kind of attacking like Michael Tal. You're always chasing and putting your opponent on the spot to try to find the best move. So I play pawn to e6 after 15 minutes. And so objectively f4, but practically e6. Very good move. Because my opponent is forced to play queen f6, which I had seen, takes, but now I go rook c7, and things are really not clear here. Really not. I mean, try to defend here with black. It's really tough. I'm threatening to win back the piece I'm threatening to win, let's be honest. But you can't defend this easily. Rook h7 is not possible. The king moving is possible, but gives this with a tempo and initiative. This pawn is undefendable. You can take, but to what extent? You can take here, but it's ambiguous. Best line here is to take rook takes and not king g8 because there's bishop e4 here, which equalizes, but king e8, which wins for black. To this, I thought I had this, honestly, and I thought this was actually winning for white. But really hard to find. So my opponent plays f takes, and now d takes, and it's equal here. And he plays this next move very fast. Only move here is, no, two moves. This equalizes after check and this and bishop c4. But this is the only move that keeps a small edge. So I'll get back the piece, but I'll have to give some things. So this, rook h6. And this is equal. But my opponent plays rook h6 now. And I'm tending towards being low on time. I have like 25 minutes, right? But I look at e7, I don't like it, and I play instead a move I really loved, which is a mistake objectively. But look at this one, pawn to f4. It's only a mistake because this is a better move, but it's a sane move. On takes, I have g5 with a pawn fork. How crazy is that? And I'm threatening a pawn fork. However, I missed knight e8, which he didn't find, but this equalizes nearly. But this is super hard to defend. Like, my opponent plays knight d5 here, and now loses to e7 check, king e8, and takes. I'm sacrificing my rook, or the exchange rather, for takes to now take this pawn, be a rook down, and be completely winning in this position. That was the only way through, by the way. And if rook takes, we just trade, and then we get into this extremely winning endgame with, like, this pawn is almost queening. And to me, like, this was the best move because, okay, I get check, and then this, and I'll queen, and he'll sack the rook, and we can go through this, actually. So, wait, we can go through this, actually. So this, check, this, I had queen. This is completely winning, by the way, but I didn't know this at the time, of course. So, like, king here. And what's so winning about this is I have bishop f7 attacking the knight, and g6 is coming. And it's, like, completely over. Like, how do you stop g7? So that's what I thought was the best for black, like rook h8 and giving that. My opponent, however, plays a move I didn't see and plays rook h7. To which I'm like, okay, takes, and then rook takes would be quite unpleasant because my pawn is not as far as in the pawn takes h6 variation. But then I just see a move and I'm like, oh my god, I won. I won. Bishop g6 check. Instead of taking the rook, how romantic, we just check the king, and we will be promoting our pawn instead. The rook going here doesn't do anything. Takes, and e8 queen, and the king going up is e8 queen with a queen up. My opponent shakes my hand and rushes off. By the way, the entire game, there was like a fly around the board, and my opponent like had wrapped up a sheet, because they had like a feedback sheet that was on the board before the round, and he wrapped it up. He was like trying to kill it, so it was really distracting. And he once said during the game, he like missed the fly, and he goes, "I'm gonna kill it." So distracting. I won on the double round that day, twice, against two players, 2100. It's like a plus 25 FIDE day for me. But I have to close out this tournament. And I'm playing a very strong player. She beat Daniel Gersh, who completely laid me out earlier this tournament. And I'm playing Jasmine Su, who has 2250 and is one of the strongest females. She's the strongest U15 female in the country, other than Alice Lee, I believe. Like, she's breaking records, and she plays e4. Now, all my opponents are taken off course by the lies of my entire game database and online account that say that I play e5. Because I play c5. You'll see a Sicilian by me by the end of this tournament. I promise you that. I play Sicilian defense for like the second time of my career of like 250 games. Knight f3, e6, and my idea is to play what I played against earlier this tournament, the 4 knights. I have a nice file against the 4 knights that I made myself with very strong engines from Chessify, and the 4 knights equalizes. Like, it's a very good opening. And it's very straightforward. It's very straight line. Because e6, white doesn't have these bishop e5 Rosolimos or Moscows on e6. So more often than not, you'll receive d4, forced move, and on knight takes, knight f6. And it's like very direct. Like, white has to defend this, and so it's only here that really the 4 knights get split into. Like knight bd5, knight takes and bishop d3, a3 here is a move, bishop e3 is something. So it's only here that it gets split. But my opponent had one game in the database with knight takes c6. And I was betting on the fact that she was inflexible against this opening that is pretty rare. Like, 4 knight Sicilian is like the 6th most popular Sicilian, I'd say. maybe that's a hot take. Yeah, 6th or 5th or 6th. It's not like top 3. It's not like a Najdorf where you have something memorized, with white. So takes. We're following her one game, but in that one game, she was very confident because her opponent played queen c7, which can lead into lines that are like +1 for white, but the white king is like on f3 or something, some wild lines. But I played bishop b7. And so here, your plan is to go c5, queen c7, queen c6, and fights for equality very well. I'm in book a long time, and this is where I activate the bookworm. 99 rating overall. The opening is my scripture. Know the entire opening until book moves run dry, then proceed to know the plans and try to outplay your opponent from there. This is an extremely strong thing in chess, is when you know pretty much everything in what is played. So bishop e7, my opponent plays bishop e2, which is normal. c5, castles, queen c7, this is normal theory. Knight d6, bishop takes, pawn takes. You can't take here because of c4 winning a piece. So I play queen c6, and now there are 2 moves, f3 and bishop f3, and she plays the most principled move, f3. And now c4 gives queen d4, which is like a fork here. I had memorized all this, castles. And after bishop takes, you can take here directly, or you can play what I played, rook fc8, attacking this bishop. And here I'm still in book per like the strongest engine on earth. So b3, and I take this pawn with my queen, and we're equal. And after bishop b2, this is out of book, but it's the best move, and it's the move that was scaring me because, checkmate threat. I was like, what if this? And then the engine solved this problem for me very fast, because this is not the main engine recommendation here, because of queen b6. So white should go like rook f2, I think, to stop these pin things. But now I'm pinning her queen and forcing an endgame. And she's a little bit disgruntled, I will say. She doesn't like the idea prospect of an endgame. She doesn't like how I have 1 hour and 35 minutes on the clock, gained 5 minutes from literally playing super fast in the last moves. It's all about momentum when you're playing up. You have to put them on edge. You have to press them against a wall. Queen takes, and here this equalizes apparently, but all games in the database say what I played, knight takes. So like grandmasters, they've all played knight takes, but objectively a takes equalizes on the spot. Something about like the rook being on an open file, something like this. So I played knight takes, and now she plays bishop d3. So the thing is, she has the bishop pair, and I have 2 central pawns. That's like the imbalance. So I go d5, rook fe1. She's trying to go like f4, f5, which is a great plan, but I go knight d7, and I try to go knight c5. So my goal is to try to win a bishop pair or to try to trade 1 pair of bishops so she doesn't have the bishop pair. And on b4 here, I had planned knight b6. Problem is, b4, knight b6, the engine finds bishop d4 +1 for white, which I don't know why till this day, but it looks very dominant, right? But I thought like if I have this square, I can equalize, but apparently not. And so here she plays rook ac1, to which after knight c5, she goes back, and her plan is that after bishop a6, aiming to trade 1 pair of bishops, so she doesn't have access to the bishop pair, she goes c4. But this is a huge concession. Why? Because after takes, she either has to decide between an isolated pawn or trading off a pair of bishops, and she trades off a pair of bishops. She doesn't want to be on the verge of draw or losing, right? Because my knight would be perfectly blockading that pawn. So I take, rook takes, and now knight d3. Forking these, so she has to take my rook with check, and now move the rook. And if I want to play for a win, you actually don't take this bishop because my knight is that well placed that it's maybe slightly better than this bishop. Hot take. And so engine wants like small, teeny edge, h5. But I take. And we enter this rook endgame that I have to defend. It's clear I will have to defend it because she has a 2-on-1, which is much easier to make dangerous than a 4-on-3. And she doesn't have a king blocking her slight majority here. She has full opportunity. So I go king f8. I want to centralize my king. She does the same. So we just centralize our kings. And now I go e5, taking some squares in the center, and I want to go king e6. And she goes king d3, rook check, king here, and basically I have to hold this endgame. So I'm going to go rook c8, threaten some perpetuals, threaten some rook c1s, and f4 she plays, and now I play king e6. And she takes, and now goes king d3. She wants to do check and rook e7. So I have to shelter my king, f5, check, and now king f6. While, always focusing on my majority here. The way I draw this is to get my majority off the board, up the board, convert a pass pawn, and make it aggressive enough where I create counterplay on her side of the board, on her 2-on-1 here. So my opponent plays b4, and I go g5, and now a4, and now f4. So it's all about moving your pawns up. And this key that I just said to you, move your pawns up to create counterplay, is super important and will be critical to the game in a few moves. So she moves her pawn to b5, and suddenly I kind of don't love this plan. I say, why don't I just go behind the pawns? So another key in the rook endgames is if you want to stop pawns, you stop them with a rook behind the pawns. So I go rook c1 and now rook a1. And now she goes a6. So less strong than if she can get b6 in and create a pass pawn and get like a rook behind it, right? So this, and now I can play rook a4. This is still equal, but it's a little bit inaccurate because it allows rook e4. A little bit better would have been rook b1. But rook a4, my idea is to cut her king because I don't want her king to be aggressive and annoying, and then her rook's just like a really good defender here. So she goes rook e8. And now she's trying to win my pawn. So I go g, and this is only move here is g4. And if you don't know to create counterplay here, you will be in trouble. Because h5, which aims to conserve this pawn, I'm giving this pawn by playing g4, but h5, which aims to give this pawn, gives rook a8, which we'll see later. So I go g4, aiming to give these two pawns against this one, probably. So she goes rook a8, and now I have to pressure this one. If takes, I'm fully assuming that I'll be down a pawn for rook a5, a7, and I'll be okay because I'll have so many checks here. The king can't go towards me because this pawn becomes strong, and it's a draw. So she goes rook b8. Very nice move. She's threatening b6 and takes a7 and a queen because she's taking up a8. So now I have to go back to a4. Prophylaxis. On takes, I would take here. So now she goes rook b7, threatening these two pawns. And now I go rook b4. If she takes, I take here, fully accepting that I'm giving a full pawn. And that was the concession that g4 gave. But g4 gives me a fighting chance with f3 down the line. King c3. Now I go back to b1. I'm keeping my position on b4. And now she goes king d4. And I had not seen this move because it breaks a rule. The king is too far from the pawns. The king can't be too far from the pawns. And what happens if the king is too far away from the pawns? f3. Creating counterplay. Perfectly timed because the rook has no rook f7 resource stopping my pawns from behind. Again, completely neglecting this pawn. The counterplay is so much more important to get the king out of there. If the king is anywhere near here to defend and take, then I could be 2-0 and losing. So f3 aims to attract the king back because I'm threatening f2, which is crucial. The king is attracted back, and now I have check, king here, and now I can move this pawn out of the way. And here I was pretty confident that I can get a draw because after rook b8, aiming to win the pawn here, I have this very nice resource, rook a3, only move. And I think she missed this because she was a bit disgruntled at this move. She played rook check, I go here. Very important that you go here and not here. Why? Because on rook here, now I have check, king moves, and rook b2. Taking up this pawn, and she can't defend like this, and she can't attack my pawn. So my king had to be on g6 for this to happen, and not on g5, because if I had played king g5, queen rook f7 with still chances for white. So now she plays this, and it basically equalizes, and I assume full responsibility of giving this pawn, but it's not even that. We're equalizing. Otherwise, if she stays around this pawn, I have checks forever. So she has to get out, and now it's equal. After king g5, I even can keep this pawn here with rook a5 check, and now just king h7, king g7. The white king can never come this way towards my rook to try to intervene because this pawn queens. So it's a complete draw. And finally, she plays a move which I had not seen that made my heart drop. Rook c7. And I was like, oh, okay. She's trading pawns. She's trading pawns for a draw, and then she offered a draw here, and we concluded with a draw. I finished the tournament. Initial rank 105. I finished the tournament rank 67, tied for 45th, with 4.5 out of 9, breaking even in the score, so 50% score, and plus 34 FIDE. And towards the end of the month of August, my FIDE rating will have blasted way past my peak of 2058 to 2068. My previous peak was achieved in June 2025, and since then it's been tough to recover, but I'm very happy that with a plus 44 in the month of August, the 3 games that happened in the Royal City Masters went well as well. I will have gained plus 44 total in the month of August 2025, and it's just a start. We're going for that 2100. We're going for that title, and you will experience every step of the way on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a marvelous day.